go over a little bit of what we've got going today. So here's our grain bill for our pumpkin oatmeal stout. We're going to be using 8 pounds of US 2-row pale malt, 2 pounds of flaked oats, 0.5 pounds of pale chocolate, 0.5 pounds of white wheat malt, 0.25 of Carafa 3, and 0.25 pounds of black malt. And yes, we are making a stout. 2 ounces of Cascade hops whole cone. Those are for my parents. And then we're using Darkness A10 from Imperial Yeast. Makes amazing stout. It's so good. And then we've got sugar pie pumpkin that I processed. So I roasted it and then skinned it and then mashed it. So we've got 4 pounds of sugar pie pumpkin ready to go. And we'll put that in at 15 minutes near the end of the boil. And then we got a 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon that's ground, or ground cinnamon, I should say, half teaspoon of nutmeg, half teaspoon of clove, half teaspoon of allspice, all of which are ground. And we're going to be putting that in at about 5 minutes to the end. So cool, a couple things, and I'll underline these with the flaked oats and wheat. Actually, I might go down that list here in a moment. So yeah, so let's talk about the recipe real fast. And actually, I'm going to look back and make sure you guys can hear me. Cool. Okay, you guys can hear me. All right, so looking at the grain bill, this is what's the main part of the recipe for our beer, okay? Now, it depends on the style of beer, but we have several types of grains that we use. We have base malts. I shouldn't say grains, sorry, base malts. There's several types of malts that we use. We use a lot of grain: wheat, rye, barley, I guess rice, quinoa. We can do all that other stuff. And I said oats already. Anyways, you can even put corn in beer, all that crazy stuff. It gets wild. It gets bananas. It's so good. But anyways, when it comes to a recipe, we're talking about like a balance of malts to get the proper recipe. You've got your base malts, which is going to be where you get most of your alcohol from, your sugars from, a lot of the color and a lot of the flavor. And it's just think of it as the base. So like, for example, our base malt is 8 pounds of US 2-row. So that's going to give us a bright golden color, biscuity flavor, and just kind of a nice balanced breadiness, which is great. Just what you expect with beer. And then we have specialty malts. And the specialty malts are any malt that's going to be adding more complexity, color, flavor to the beer, or certain characteristics that we want, like whether it's like a smooth creaminess, or if it's head retention, or that kind of thing. So, for example, with an oatmeal stout, according to the Beer Judge Certification Manual, you want to have at least 20%, up to 20% of your recipe being flaked oats, or oats in general. Doesn't have to be malted, but any form of oat has to be at least 20% ish, up to 20%. So we have about 20% of our oatmeal stout being flaked oats. This is going to add kind of like a creaminess, a smoothness, and it's quite nice. So when you think of an oatmeal stout, you think of it being sweet and creamy. So that's where you're going to get that. You can also get sweet creaminess from corn or lactose sugar as well. And lactose sugar will amp up the sweetness more than just the smoothness or creaminess of the mouthfeel. You can get more of that from corn and flaked oats. So there's that. Okay, so that's our flaked oats. This is the most important. If I just had these two, that would be an oatmeal ale, not a stout. But what makes it a stout is the color and the other flavors that we get in a stout. So when you think of a stout, you're thinking of, there's some sweetness, there's some robustness, some roastiness, maybe some chocolate, like bittersweet chocolate, or even some coffee. Okay, so those are going to come from our other specialty malts, which are our pale chocolate, our Carafa 3, and our black malt. Those are very, very dark grains, and because they're so dark, sometimes when they go through the kilning process, they can get what we call tannins, something that's like an unpleasant flavor. It could be really bitter, it could be really astringent, but we don't want that in our beer, or too much of that in our beer. A little bit is okay. So that's why I have half a pound of chocolate malt, 0.25 pounds of Carafa 3, and 0.25 pounds of black malt, because they are darker grains, and they will provide a huge amount of tannin if I put too much in. It's going to be not pleasant on the mouth. And last but not least, we got a little bit of wheat in here. I did half a pound of wheat, and that's more for head retention. With this stout, what we should be looking at in terms of the head, it's going to be like kind of like a tan head, um, and the wheat will also help it to sustain, a sustaining head. And Carafa, I think, also helps with a little bit of the keeping a residual head on top of the beer. So that's what we're looking at the grain bill, okay, for this particular beer. If you have any more questions about grain bill, holler at me and I'll let you know. I see there's some things.